your Chargers linebacker, Deion Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. If this is your first time tuning in the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, number one, first and foremost. Obviously, it's been a little over a week since our last show that we got a chance to do. Not my fault, but for those of you who are wondering where the hell we were the past week, Dan Wolkenstein has been in a good spot on vacation, basically for the better part of the last 7 days. Dan was in Hawaii for that period of time. I know he was probably processing everything that we had to talk about and just getting that, Chargers, Houston Texans playoff game behind him. But this is the day right now where it's the kickoff to the offseason. We're putting 2024 officially in the rearview mirror. It's time to look forward to the next couple of months. We obviously have the All-Star games coming up here in the next couple of weeks for college with the East-West Shrine game, with the Senior Bowl. We have the Combine beyond that, the draft beyond that, free agency beyond that. There's plenty to get into as we kick off the offseason with this show today. Dan Wolkenstein, good morning. Crack open your caffeine, whatever you got with you. I'm sure you got a nice cup of Joe sitting to your left or your right now. But this show, once again, as we mentioned yesterday, for those of you who saw it on social media, it is not being controlled by Dan and I today. We are not driving the narrative. We are not driving the schedule of this show whatsoever. This is all controlled by you today. So whatever topic you want to talk about, whether we're talking offseason roster constructions, free agency, NFL draft prospects, offseason storylines, whatever it is all being controlled by you today. Dan Wolkenstein, it's time for me to shut up. Feel like when it's a week that we haven't had a show, it's almost like, hey, do we still remember how to do the pod? Just like riding a bike, right? Just get right back in the swing of things.
Something like that. Yeah, we'll find out if we know how to do it still. It has been a bit. Mahalo and aloha from now California. It was a much needed break, not gonna lie. It's been a rough bit of time, put it that way. But vacation was great. Kickoff the offseason, I think, is a little bittersweet, but I think also necessary for a lot of folks, myself included. There's so many ways to dice this in terms of how this show is going to go, but I kind of like that we're rolling the dice and letting the folks in the chat, the folks voicemails and all that kind of stuff kind of dictate what it is that we discuss. I think people, for the most part, Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, but all eyes now are kind of going towards the draft and some free agency and some trade rumors. I think many of us are Bills fans today, but other than that, I kind of like this. We take off the reins. Folks in the chat take on the reins. Let's go to work. We'll chat as they would like. Jake, how are you this morning? I apologize for being late this morning. Like Jake said, I'm on Hawaii time first. Second, I didn't have any milk that I could froth this morning for my coffee. So I was left with just like black coffee with, I'm not going to get into it. But anyways, here we are. Jake, happy Championship Sunday, I think is what they call it for some people. But for us, kickoff to the offseason. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. You know me, how I get through the drolls of what Chargers fans have experienced over the last couple of weeks.
Alcohol.
That wasn't my first choice.
Sleepless nights.
That was 1.5. That was how it was. No, you get into the draft, man. I've told you this several times as long as we've been doing this show. To help your psyche in the offseason, hell, do it during the regular season as well. So by the time that it gets to this point, you're more prepared for it. Getting into draft prospects is some of the best medicine that you could possibly have for teams that are no longer in the playoffs, that aren't vying for a championship. It is some of the best medicine for you just to sit back, enjoy some tape, Make your analyzations. Who are your guys come April 24th? It's better than therapy, Dan. I don't know how to explain it to you. That should be everybody's off-season therapy.
I think if we're being honest, I think it has to be. So yes, to Jake's point, let's crack open whatever you got. I have coffee. Jake, what do you got?
I've been cycling back and forth through the energy drinks lately, and I was walking through Albertsons this morning, and I said to myself, you know what? It's been a minute since I have had a watermelon flavored Monster. I can't explain what compelled me to go in this direction.
The power of Christ compelled you.
But you know what? I felt like we were going to get into so much today. I felt like I needed just a little bit extra oomph behind it. So what the hell? Live dangerously.
Forgotten locale. Shout out to Albertsons.
That's right.
Brad says, that's funny. Do we still know how to talk?
We're going to find out in the next hour and a half, aren't we? We're going to find out.
We are. Let's see. Sweet jumps. Wow, I can't talk. The Golden Girls. Try saying that 5 times fast. Of the AFC West pick from day on was funny. Jake, new head coach
hilarious.
in the AFC West.
Yes.
Pete Carroll. As much as I hate on the Raiders and everybody in the AFC West doesn't like the Raiders and most people don't, it's kind of a good. I don't know about the future in 5 years, but for what that team needs right now, I think culture setting with Pete Carroll is a good way to go.
It's a good hire for them. Can't argue that. And for the AFC West in general, we talked about this in a couple weeks ago, just talking about, the unfortunate loss for the Chargers this season and what you expect over the next 3 years. The AFC West is just going to continue to get better and better. And this was prior to Pete Carroll coming to the AFC West. And now on top of that, with Denver getting better, with Bo Nix going to be able to take that next step, with Sean Payton, what they're going to be able to build in Denver. Now you have Pete Carroll coming in. Obviously, they still need a quarterback over there in Las Vegas. But like you said, it's much in the same type of vein as Jim Harbaugh, where it's a culture setter. It's setting a different type of tone that the Raiders have not had in God knows how long. And now you have this AFC West, essentially murder's row of championship quarterbacks and guys who have found success at multiple different levels. AFC West is going to be a bitch next year. Arguably the best 4 coaches in any division in the history of the NFL. To have that type of coaching talent in a single division is nuts.
Yeah, this is it's gonna be wild, and lots of time to discuss coaching. Let's let them get to a winning record before we can talk about how successful they'll be in the 2025 season. Jake, it's your favorite time of year. This is like
yes,
Christmas.
sir.
BPA says Dark Samus 100 $1.99 donation. Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy New Year. Can we still say Happy New Year? It's still January. BPA means almost every position is fair game, right? Jake, the floor is yours. You've been waiting all year for this.
First of all, I'm happy that you're now allowing me to really get into the draft talk. Outside of that, it's kind of a necessity.
You're welcome.
And we don't really have much else to talk about. But thank you for finally allowing me to do this. When you really look at it, obviously BPA when it comes to the draft, it's going to all be dictated on what the Chargers are going to do free agency wise. And thankfully for them, they've got a lot of money to spend between now and April. If it was me and someone was actually asking me this question, and again, I set this all in the tone of what's going to happen free agency, because when you look at the positions that the Chargers have coming up, and remember, they're going to have 30 free agents this cycle, which is a lot. And if you're looking where they're going to prioritize, I look at the positions where you have the potential to possibly lose a number of different players. It was good to hear earlier this week that Khalil Mack is going to be coming back. Not elite, not official with the Chargers, but you have a pretty good feeling, especially after the way that Jim Harbaugh has talked about him, that he's going to return for another season with the Chargers. What happens with Joey Bosa? Don't know. Along that defensive line, Tahir Tart, Poona Ford, what are you going to do to beef that up? Defensive line in general is a position where, to me, it just felt neglected a little bit, especially from the draft standpoint. And my God, do you have a great class and great players to choose from, specifically in the first round. Corner is another position that I think about. You follow the bouncing ball of what Joe Ortiz talks about. He's always said you can never have enough corners on this team. Christian Fulton slated to be a free agent. Asante Samuel Jr. slated to be a free agent. You need to get some number one talent at cornerback once again. And Dan, you can't argue with the tight end position either, because as Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz said in their closing press conference, they said that they, meaning the two of them, they failed Justin Herbert this year. And when they say that, they're talking about it in a skill sense or circumstance of putting the pieces surrounding him in order to assist him in winning. So does that mean
it did him a disservice? He said, yes.
Thank you. That's the correct term. So if Colston Loveland is sitting there somehow at 22, that just makes all the sense in the world to select him. So BPA, I say, yes, it's definitely on the table. I saw another person in here talking about a possible trade down, which, speaks my language. I've been asking for a trade down.
Waiting for that. You're still
how many years is it now?
84 years.
Before Tom Telesco, I've still been waiting for something like that to happen. So would totally be down. I would totally be up for a trade down if it made sense, given who is still on the board and if it acquires you more draft capital. The Chargers are projected to have 10 draft picks in this upcoming slate with the additions. Not official, but what the projected compensatory picks coming out, that should be the number that you're looking at. So it should be good. It should be a good offseason for Joe Ortiz to feast on from a financial standpoint, from a free agency standpoint, and from a draft standpoint, because as he said during his first press conference, I need to get this team some more compensatory picks. We need more swings at the bat. And it's like, have you ever been more excited to have compensatory picks and extra picks?
We never even talked about compensatory picks.
God. It's amazing.
It is. You know what else is amazing, Jake? Okay, I think Chargers fans, but more so this is for you, Jake.
Yes, go ahead.
Waiting a long time. And if you fast forward a few months and that sweet, precious sound.
What, the chimes? Oh.
One more time.
Give it to me. Love it.
Okay, one more time.
You're never going to wear that sound out, by the way.
No. We're talking draft right now. And let's get through some of these super chats real quick because we got a lot of them. And thank you to everybody. We talked about BP already. Dark Samus 100, $5 donation. Jared Wilson might run a 4.7. And which free agent guards do you like? Whoever plays right guard next year has to block Chris Jones twice a year. We need elite guard talent. Emphasis on guard, emphasis on talent. You heard Jim Harbaugh, heard Joe Ortiz talk about doing a disservice to one Justin Herbert. You saw what happened in that game versus Houston. They got absolutely wrecked on the inside. You feel good about the tackle situation. Protecting Justin Herbert is paramount. You saw what they did, put their money where their mouth is, to go get Joe Alt. Imagine if they didn't get Joe Alt. How much worse that would have looked. But still, not great on the interior, and that has to get fixed. You know it. I know it. Every opponent knows it. You know they know it too. Jake, first, Jared Wilson. Second, free agent guards. You're on mute.
I'm going to do this backwards. So, because I know everybody has been talking about when it comes to free agency that everybody wants to put the train behind Trey Smith, and for good reason. It makes sense. But you're going to get into a bidding war with other teams that are vying for Trey Smith out there. Again, as you mentioned, Dan, the Chargers essentially, I don't think that you can't fix all of these issues along the interior through free agency. You saw what happened with the three combination of Zion Johnson, Bradley Bozeman, and Trey Pipkins throughout the duration of the year, and it wasn't good. It was something that the Chargers were able to mask at certain times, and towards the end of the season, it looked better from a pass blocking and run blocking efficiency grade for that group. But as you mentioned, that Houston game is going to live with them in the offseason when you look at just all the problems that they had in the interior.
It reminds me of the Jacksonville game and that living with the defense for so long. And that Houston game was kind of like them kind of, I don't know, flushing the demon, so to speak, because that defense balled out. That offensive line is going to have a chip on their shoulder all year because of that.
Yeah, the difference was in the Jacksonville game, after the defensive collapse, nothing was really done to correct that. I have much more faith that things will get corrected this offseason.
Fair.
This center class, and I've been waiting to talk about this, and I've actually been talking with a number of different people about this offline on social media, but this center class in general, we knew going into it was not as strong as last year's center class, but it has taken such a different shape throughout the college football year, because leading up into this center class, everything was, okay, who's going to be the standout between Parker Brailsford, Jonah Monaheim out of USC. Jonah Monaheim doesn't end up having the best possible year. Parker Brailsford ends up going back to college. I was really looking forward to seeing the ascent of Jake Slaughter out of Florida. He ends up going back to college. Bryce Foster out of Kansas, who had another good year, ends up going back to college. So then you're there with Jared Wilson. People are loving what they're seeing from Seth McLaughlin, and he goes down with an injury with his Achilles in November, and it fluctuates just everything that is going on right now. So now even if you've been following what's been happening at the Shrine Bowl, they're talking about taking offensive linemen that had never played a lick at center, whether it's at guard or tackle, and specifically because of their measurements, and trying them out at the center position. Now, you've got some guys that are interesting there for sure, but in terms of where you prioritize it, in terms of drafting, is anybody's guess. I understand why Jared Wilson essentially is the consensus number one center as it stands right now. Jake Majors would probably be another one behind him there as far as looking at the next best available option. But Dan, A, where do you prioritize it? B, are you going to trust a rookie center in this class to protect Justin Herbert, to give you better output than what you got of 1 year of Bradley Bozeman? Again, not saying that it won't be a good long-term solution. I'm simply just saying for 2025.
Sure.
Can you trust that? So when I look at that,
in short, if it's a good one, yes. And you've seen that countless times.
And if you had, hell, I won't even go as far as to say, because obviously there's no JPJ in this draft class. There's no Zach Frazier in this draft class as far as the center goes. But even if you had a lot of this returning talent in this class that I was just mentioning, I would feel so much better about prioritizing a center. And yes, obviously you need a center. I'm simply just saying, with the other positions that you now have, where do you prioritize drafting a center at this point, with essentially not the deepest center class that you would have liked to have seen? So going in the free agency route, you have Drew Dahlman as a free agent option. You have Ryan Kelly, but he's getting up there in age, and he's battled injuries the last 2 years. You also have, who is it? Coleman Shelton out of Chicago as another option that people have talked about. That's really the big three as far as free agent centers goes. So this whole center class in general has just taken the biggest shift that you could have for one single position. And how do you reshuffle now? Because apparently it's going to be reshuffled with guys that have played center and then guys who haven't played center. And do you hitch your wagon to that? The Chargers need to find themselves a long-term center option. There's no doubt about that. But how do you do it? And how do you do it confidently to know that it's going to be able to protect Justin Herbert for the long haul?
Well, and this is what makes the offseason so fascinating. And I think it's easy to get sucked into a specific funnel of conversation without kind of taking on the macro of this. And so Roland says, hey, Jake, if you and Dan were the Chargers GM, what player position would you choose as our number one pick? That is almost impossible to answer right now, because you have no idea what they're going to spend their crap ton of money on. They could have upwards of $90 million. If they got rid of Joey Bosa and they got rid of Trey Pipkins, they're looking at like $90-ish million in cap space, which is a ton of coin to play with. then you think, okay, well, what positions would they want to look at in the free agency market versus the draft? And you think of draft capital, you think of premium, you think of salary caps, all that kind of stuff. You look at certain positions, right? Center, offensive lineman, especially interior, center, guard. You look at running back. Like all of these are important positions. Interior defensive line. All of these historically are less premium positions in terms of salary garnered versus, let's say, a receiver or a tackle or a quarterback or a corner. So if you're looking at it financially purely, it would make sense that they would go after a lot of those positions in free agency versus the draft, because they can use draft capital on premium positions that might cost them otherwise $30+ million. Then there's the trade market, right? And we've all heard all the DK Metcalf trade rumors. We talk about T. Higgins a bunch, $30+ million, right? DK Metcalf is already, even with his year left on his contract, it's like 20 something million cap space, which they can afford. So as a GM, it's trying to figure out like what your window is and where you want to allocate your resources. You still got to factor in your Rashawn Slater contract. And there's a boatload of free agents that are on your current roster you got to think about. There's a question here before we get to which position you get to. I think there's a question here for free agency. Let's see, where was it? They were talking about, Stephen Rutledge says have to resign Tart and Ford. Okay, so I think this is the important part. First step is figuring out which of the folks that are currently on your roster you want to keep and want to pay for, both high end and low end. So I think you and my number one selection, I think, will be Elijah Molden. Like, I think he is such a glue guy. I love the way he played, and he was fantastic for the team. That's secondary. I think both Tart and Ford, both were fantastic. Do I think they bring both of them back? Probably not. But keep one for sure. So I guess in your opinion, I mean, there's a grip of these guys. You talk about 30 folks that are free agent. You know, a lot of them you're not necessarily going to keep, but you got guys like Khalil Mack, Poona Ford, J.K. Dobbins. I think a lot of folks are looking to have back possibly if the money's right. Morgan Fox, Christian Fulton, Josh Palmer, Asante Samuel Jr., Denzel Perryman, Bradley Bozeman, Simi Fehoko, Hayden Hurst, DJ Shark, Peter. You know, the list goes on and on and on and on. The names aren't as important, I think, as what we've seen historically, because that's really all that mattered has been the names on the Chargers, and then the roster just gets absolutely shot with injury and then they're screwed. With this coaching staff, they bring guys up, right? But in terms of pure talent and or glue, let's just say 5. If there were 5 guys that you must have return from this previous season, Khalil Mack, clearly 1. After that, Elijah Molden, I think both of us would agree, 2. Who are the other 3?
Dobbins, Tart, Ford.
Okay, so Palmer's gone, Morgan Fox is gone, Asante's gone, Perriman's gone.
Again, I'm not saying necessarily that they're gone, but yes. if you're prioritizing the top 5, that's where my brain goes as far as the top guys to bring back. You can reshuffle this however you want, and again, not eliminating any other people from the top 5 that I have talked about in terms of bringing them back, but those would be the top 5 on my priority list for sure.
Okay. So, a lot of people want to talk draft. I think we should get the DK Metcalf conversation out of the way.
Go for
it. One of the conversations Jake and I had when I was in Maui was about DK Metcalf. I love the thought of it. And I would be over the moon if they did it. I'm kind of torn, honestly. The Chargers have money to where, like, if they wanted to spend it that way, sure, go for it. And getting a proven commodity of that literal size of DK Metcalf or Justin Herbert would be insane. And it would shut a whole lot of people up that have talked about, including ourselves, them not giving Justin Herbert a weapon. When you first heard it, Jake, like, and folks in the chat, whatever that means, right? You probably have to spend whatever the cap space is, 20-something million this year. I think it's 25 million-ish this year. Plus, you're going to have to trade whatever draft capital to get him to
Which
Seattle.
they're going to be looking for a high return.
I would probably guess it's second or third round pick would be my guess. Just looking at things in the past. Would you do that for a rental or would you do that for a long term? Would you pay long term? Are you comfortable with him being your guy long term? Like, let's say you pay $30 million for 3 years. DK, Justin, Lad. It's tough.
You know what it is that I kind of despise a little bit is when you know you're going to have to absorb a big time contract, but you're also going to have to pay a premium in draft capital to do it. And again, we hear, and who knows how much truth to this actually is, because we always hear these type of offseason stories where it's an anonymous NFL executive or an anonymous NFL person in a certain division that starts these type of trade.
Yeah, one random dude at a water cooler said that they were possibly going to trade him. Right. Now all of a sudden,
great offseason banter and subject matter to talk about, but take it with a grain of salt, obviously. Now, I think the Chargers, one way or the other, whether it's DK Metcalf, if any of this ends up being true, or a free agent wide receiver, I think they're absolutely going to prioritize it. Why? Look at some of the ways that they tried to better the offensive situation at the trade deadline. You tried to trade for Deontay Johnson, missed out. You tried to get him again after he was released, after he was put on waivers. You missed out. So I think there's a big priority for them to improve that skill position overall. And as we were just mentioning, some of the free agents that are going to be out there, Joshua Palmer, Simi Fehokos, you need to replenish this wide receiver stable. Outside of Ladd McConkey, when you're talking about guys who are able to beat one-on-one coverage, you can't just have one guy doing it. So I expect wide receiver to be a big priority for the Chargers. Hell, I wouldn't even be surprised if they double dip with it, Dan. Honestly, you go out and you get one of these big name free agent wide receivers, and in this particular draft class with the wide receivers that are in there, you round it out. I wouldn't be surprised if they double dipped whatsoever. As far as DK goes, he's 27 years old. You're still taking on that big number contract, but Seattle's going to want, if they even want to trade him, they're going to want back a little bit more compensation than just getting that contract off their books. So I'm still indifferent about it. The talent, obviously, that DK has is nobody's denying that. What he can do to stretch the field, nobody's denying that. Would it be your best option in terms of a downfield threat for the Chargers? No question about it. But I'm not so sure about it. And who knows? I could be completely wrong on it. I'm simply just trying to put the numbers together. Would Seattle even be open to this? That's a huge part of the conversation. We have no idea. 2, taking on that type of a contract. 3, giving up, I would say I understand the contract, but Seattle's not going to just let him walk out of the building for pennies. So it'll be interesting, but I do think that the Chargers will go after a big name free agent wide receiver, no question.
And not even just free agent. Folks in the chat are talking about Garrett Wilson, who I spoke about early on during the season, where I said he'd be the one guy I'd be looking at for a trade if they would do it. Is he available? Not sure. Do any of these names entice you? These are free agent wide receivers coming up this year. You got T. Higgins, obviously. I think folks are excited about that. You've got Chris Godwin. You've got folks like Amari Cooper. You've got Stephon Diggs. You've got DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown, Darius Slayton. Some of these names are on the high end. Some of these names are kind of the low end. You got Mike Williams out there. Keenan Allen's out there. The double dip component, honestly, like what I can see them doing is one or the other. I can see them going after a high-end draft capital receiver, low-end free agent receiver, low-end, quote-unquote, like a Darius Slayton type, or a T. Higgins type wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf, whatever, and then day 3 receivers in the draft. Any of those free agent guys that you would see, like that, that would make this team better. I mean, honestly, most of them would make this team better, but anyone that you would prefer?
I mean, if Chris Godwin did not have the injury history that he has, that would seem really enticing to me.
Yeah.
And then you look at other guys that are still talented, but are kind of getting up there in age. So how long are you actually going to end up signing them for? Maybe some of these guys you could end up getting for 1-year deals. Hey, considering the 1-year deals that you hit on just this last year alone with Joe Ortiz and company, it's not that bad of an idea to possibly look at. I think the Chargers have their eyes on 2 or 3 as it relates to this wide receiver free agency class that they'll say to themselves, this is who we're going to prioritize. This is who we're going to go after as far as that first day of free agency. And if they end up missing out on it for whatever reason, they'll circle back around to see how they can round out that group, and maybe they reprioritize it in the draft for where they want to get it. And how do you round out that group now? If we're to assume that Joshua Palmer is not able to return, how do you round it out with what Ladd McConkey does, what Quentin Johnston does, what Darius Davis does? You're going to need some weapons back there, because don't forget, this was perceived by people that were just doing an overall roster ranking, whatever it is. They put the Chargers wide receiver room as one of the worst in terms of overall talent goes in the offseason.
You saw it in that playoff game. It was Ladd and then nobody.
It was Ladd and whoever wanted to step up or not want to drop a ball or whatever it was. But you can't just rely on Ladd in these type of situations. So you're going to have to prioritize it in one way, shape or form. I'm not sure.
It blows my mind that we are still here looking at that meme of the quarterback throwing, and either he's getting smoked because he has no offensive line help to protect
the one
him.
with the stick figures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the receiver, and it's either anybody or it's a baller receiver. The fact that we're still here talking about offensive line or receiver / offensive weapon help for Justin, and it's going to be year 6 for him. Like, that's insane to me. Is it fair? I don't know. But if you're Tom Telesco, not Tom Telesco. If you're,
how long were you in Maui for?
I was gonna say, I got to go back in the time machine. Good Lord. Miguel Guzman says it might go for all line first. Protecting Herbert is number 1 priority. Giving Herbert weapons is number 2.
Yes.
We're back to the meme, man.
Well,
Jamar
Dan,
Chase, Penny Sewell.
Hang on 2 seconds here. You and I were prisoners of the moment 1 year ago, as were a lot of other Chargers fans, and for good reason, when it was this whole debate between Malik Neighbors and Joe Alt. Now, Daniel Jeremiah said it best after Joe Alt was selected last year, and this is something that we need to remember. He says, Jim Harbaugh has been telling everybody what he's going to be doing since he got hired on as the coach. And we even saw it with free agency moves leading up to that with the Will Disleys of the world. He was going to try to improve that run game. He was going to protect Justin Herbert because he perceives offensive linemen as weapons. I don't know how you can look back at that Houston game and say, we're not going to prioritize the offensive line again.
But you could say the same thing about the receivers or tight end.
You could, but I kind of go back to the old adage. If you don't have anybody to protect the quarterback, it really doesn't matter who the hell the wide receivers are going to be because the quarterback's going to be on his ass. Remember what we said. If you flipped that whole scenario around and Malik Neighbors was drafted at 5 instead of Joe Alt, I don't know if Justin Herbert finishes the season, considering what happens.
It would look like Little Giants, where like you'd have just like folks just running around as fast as they could, and then hopefully somebody can catch it. Some of them are going to be in bubble wrap. Some are going to be injured. Some of them, like, it would look ridiculous, and you wouldn't want to see that. You really wouldn't want to. I don't know, man. This is why it's fun. All right, let's get some of these super chats real quick. Let's see. I talked about trading down. Jake, right up your alley. I want Omarion Hampton round 1. Am I crazy or what? Envy Talent, thank you for the $2 donation. Omarion Hampton. Jake, no idea who that is. This is all you.
No, it's not a crazy idea. If you want to select Omarion Hampton, I really like what I seen out of him out of North Carolina. Obviously, everybody's consensus number 1 running back in this class, no question, is Ashton Genty. I don't personally see Ashton Genty lasting till 22 for the Chargers, but this running back class in general is so deep. Along with Omarion Hampton, you've got Quinshon Judkins. God, it's early on a Sunday, and I can't even speak properly. Devin Neal. RJ Harvey is another running back that's kind of making his way up at draft boards. Dan's own Arizona State, Cam Scatterboo.
Yeah, let's go, baby.
There is a shit ton of running backs to select in this. And again, I have perceived this from what we saw last year for the Chargers, that it is going to continue to be a running back by committee, much in the same way that it was in Baltimore before Derrick Henry showed up. That's kind of going to be the running back crew that you're going to roll with. It's not just going to be one guy that's going to tote the rock for you. I mean, look what Detroit did with their 2 running back system that they had. I think you're going to find that you're going to want multiple guys to contribute. And Greg Roman had talked about this more specifically during training camp and leading up to the regular season, that, unfortunately it didn't end up getting executed the way that they wanted to. But he talked about having whether it was between Kamani Vidal, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, that you had a running back stable of guys that they weren't just going to unleash, but they were going to give you a different flavor when they do it. So you're going to have your power guy. You're going to have your guy who's explosive. You're going to have your guy that is essentially going to be your scat back in certain wide receiver situations. Now, obviously that didn't end up working out for what the Chargers probably perceived that it was going to be. They didn't really use their running backs on screens that often. They had some inconsistencies in their run game because the interior of the offensive line couldn't block properly. Literally the best way that running backs could get any positive yardage was running to Rashawn Slater's side. Go figure. But I think that there is going to be a high priority for them to reprioritize that. And yes, I 100% think that they're going to select a running back out of this group, because how could you not? This is one of the best running back groups that's come out in several years. But I definitely think that they're going to move forward with that running back by committee type of mentality.
DZ says, Jim and Greg's plan backfired big time. The run game was abysmal most of the season due to offensive line and running backs. I hate to say it. Mm-hmm. Yes and no. Yes and no. When the offensive line, I'll go the other way. When J.K. Dobbins was healthy, that running game looked good for the most part. There were spaces in which that was not the case. Look at the Houston game. But for the most part, I mean, the guy had 900 yards and was on IR. So like he was doing well. After that, not great. Now, would it have been much, much better if the interior offensive line was better? Sure.
Of course.
100%. But I don't necessarily know if the plan backfired. It just, there wasn't enough of the plan, in my opinion. Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins both were on IR this past year. Like, you can't plan for that. I mean, I guess you kind of can if you know the history of those players, but they did with the best with what they could. Now, what were they going to do with guard? Like, they had Trey Pipkins, who's had like $11 million cap hit. You're not just going to let that go for nothing. I get it. But that's dead money. So they tried to transition him from tackle to guard. And I would say for the most part, probably was average, I would say, at best. We'll see. But I don't think the plan backfired. I wouldn't go that far. Like, there was a lot of holes that this team had to fill, and they needed to fix a bunch of things, and they did the best they could in 1 year. And that 1 year took them to 11 wins and a playoff berth. So, like, let's keep it in perspective. I'm talking to myself just as much as I'm talking to other people. As much as that sucked, given what they had going into that offseason, getting to 11 wins, having a guy almost get 1,000 yards and didn't even play for 4 games of the season, Lab going for over 1,000 yards, Justin being healthy at the end of the season, like, there were a lot of positives to take away from that. Give him another year, I think that plan works out even better, personally. Jake, question for Michigan. Nicholas Petrelli. Can you explain what makes Loveland special? Thank you for the $2 donation. I mean, there's a lot of things.
There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things. Outside of just the obvious fit and how much Jim Harbaugh would love to have Colston Loveland playing for him once again, the open catch target percentage that Colston Loveland is able to do, there was a reason why Harbaugh once upon a time called him the next Travis Kelce. And it's because of the fact that not only can Colston Loveland do it in the receiving aspect of the game, can he do it in the blocking aspect of the game, but he improvises, Dan, much in the same type of sense that Travis Kelce does in terms of cutting off his routes if he needs to, in terms of getting open for his quarterback. He has that type of improvisation ability. And hell, when you see how lethal Justin Herbert is when he has to move out of the pocket, whether it's by a called bootleg or due to defensive line pressure, those are the type of weapons that are just really going to make the difference for you. He just gets open so easily. He finds a patch of green and he's just able to make plays. His route running is fantastic. Again, he's not the best run blocker out there and didn't have the most contested catches as a tight end, but still, he is just that type of tight end presence that Justin Herbert has not had since Hunter Henry, but he's just in this new mold of tight end. And let's not forget, before this season started, this was your consensus number one tight end on the board. And then little guy over there in Penn State shows up and just absolutely goes nuclear and ignites the entire country when it comes to tight ends. And now Daniel Jeremiah has him going number 7 overall in his latest mock draft. There has been a shift in tight ends just in terms of priority that you've seen over the last couple of years. Remember 2 years ago when the tight end class was really deep, not necessarily first round talent that you ended up having in that class, but it was a deep tight end class. And everybody was still questioning why Tom Telesco did not end up selecting one. When I'm talking about the Dalton Kincaids, I'm talking about the Sam Laporta draft. Didn't end up selecting a tight end in that draft. Then you get to last year. Obviously, I was a big supporter of Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers last year. Him being selected at 13 overall, I'd say his rookie season pretty much justified that for what he was able to do. But it's a different style of tight ends that you have now, even going beyond the top 2. It's another good class because of what you have out of Harold Fannin Jr., out of Bowling Green, Gunnar Helm out of Texas. There's a lot of guys that are just coming in there that are becoming more of that receiving type of tight end, that are better at route running, that can get open on some of those certain situations. So there's a lot that Colston Loveland can do. I understand if people are higher or lower on him for whatever reason, but you'd love to get a weapon like that for Justin Herbert as a receiving option at tight end. And if that's the case, then it's probably going to be Will Dissly back to what you originally signed him for and what his bread and butter has always been, and as a run blocker. But you need a tight end like that for Justin Herbert. And essentially he got 1 year to have it with Hunter Henry, and then it was gone.
Real quick, there are folks in here talking about J.K. Dobbins and Austin Eckler, and the Discord is ridiculous. Discourse is ridiculous. I don't think there is a single person who watched Chargers football over the last 5 years that will tell you that Austin Eckler was a better running back than J.K. Dobbins was. No one. If you want to talk about offensive weapon, if you want to talk about, receiver out of the backfield, whatever, any question, sure. If we're talking running back, let's just stop. This Chargers team has not had a running game in forever. And J.K. Dobbins absolutely gave them a running game since, Melvin Gordon, maybe? I appreciate Austin Eckler for what he was, but you also have to acknowledge, kind of what he wasn't. So let's just stop. Enough of that. A bunch of questions here. Let's see. Let me get to it. There was somebody that had top 5. I apologize. There we go. HH4. Mr. Positivity himself. Team needs legitimate tight end, corner, running back, safety, linebacker, center, guards. Okay, so tight end, absolutely. Cornerback. Think about the quarterback room, man. Already last year to this year, or I should say 2023 to 2024, the turnover in the cornerback room was insane.
Ridiculous.
And now Christian Fulton, Elijah Molden, Asante Samuel Jr., hell, Marcus May, Eli Apple, Tony Jefferson, all these guys who played legit ball for you this year are all free agents. So you could have even more of a turnover this year. Now you have faith in Steve Klingscale, in Chris O'Leary, in Jesse Minter to right that ship. But yes, cornerback, huge. Running back, the only one on your roster right now is Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal. And Gus Edwards really hasn't shown you much. Kamani Vidal, I think he's promising, but is he your starter? I don't think so.
He hasn't shown you much. So obviously that's due to a number of different aspects, not getting the snap counts that the other running backs have gotten. But even still, outside of really the Denver Bronco game, first one of the season, there wasn't much to be heard from Kamani Vidal. So you give him a little bit more time to develop. I think that there's aspects of his game that are extremely promising. I think he has a lot of good upside, but he's never going to be your number one guy to tote the rock, which is, again, why I go back to, I think this is how Joe Ortiz is trying to form it as a running back by committee. But you need some more consistency. And of course, if you have better interior O-line play, your running backs are going to thrive that much more.
Yep. Safety, that one, I think can be solved relatively easily. I think if you bring, I think Tony Jefferson was awesome for what he was. Bring him back, I would, 100%. Elijah Molden, bring him back, 100%. You still have Alohi on contract. Am I saying Alohi is the pure number one safety behind Derwin James? No. But that one seems like an easy-ish fix, in my opinion. I think guard is the tougher one, center and guard. But if it was me right now, gun to my head, a part of me, tight end round 1 seems like what would solve the most problems and be the biggest benefit to the Chargers in terms of how many things it could fix. But we'll get to that in a bit. Jake, voicemail. Got to get to. From our friend Athir. Folks, if you want to get to the voicemail, you can call anytime, 323-902-7586. Let's hear what Athir had to say in 2025.
Dan, Jake, this is Athir, fan favorite, the most optimistic fan. I'm so excited.
Self-proclaimed fan favorite.
Like how it sounds like the mother of dragons, breaker of chains, Khaleesi of the grass sea. He's got all the titles right now, doesn't he?
We're off to a hot start here.
About this offseason. I will explain in the chat tomorrow what is my prediction and why we are winning the Super Bowl next February. My question is the DK Metcalf trade is going to happen, or are they going to Higgins? I want to hear from Jake. Please, thank you. Love.
Much in the reasons that we were talking about earlier. Again, take the DK Metcalf conversation for what it's worth. I personally think it's nice discourse, great offseason conversation, but how valid is any of that? Because does Seattle even want to give him up? You don't know that. So based on process of elimination, T. Higgins, 1,000%. 1,000%. An offense for Justin Herbert to throw to that had T. Higgins, Ladd McConkey, and God help me if you had Colston Loveland at that. Whew! Oh my goodness. That would be a pretty nice offseason for the Chargers skill players, wouldn't it?
Can you imagine can you imagine the Chargers fan base? If you had like T. Higgins and Colton Loveland or Warren or whoever. Man. They'd be cooking. They'd be cooking. Now, again, on the flip side, regardless of what happens in free agency, you know that this Chargers fandom is going to be in their feelings if this Chargers brass goes offensive line in round 1 again. Regardless, doesn't matter. Folks going to be in. You remember, hell, Joe Alt, who was like the best tackle prospect in Lord knows how long, folks were pissed about. So imagine if they go guard at 22, center guard, whatever. It's going to be absolutely pandemonium in the chat. I don't think it happens. I really don't. But I guess I really haven't even asked you yet. Right now, given what we know, given what this team has done, we'll put it in the chat first. We'll let you guys get a chance to answer. But at this point, put your predictions out. Number 22. You can either go player or
early.
Position.
You're going early in this.
But you can do player or position. But given what you think they might do in free agency with what they spend their money on, what do you think makes the most sense in terms of strategy, roster building? How would you do it to end at number 22 in the NFL draft? So, like, are you fulfilling some needs? Maybe the better question is, once you fulfill whatever needs are most important in the free agency pool, what's left for you to go after at 22?
Leading up to this point, and this is how Dan likes to piss me off because he knows I hate doing game predictions during the regular season. And I'm not going to give you a straight answer. I'm sorry, just because there's too many variables at play here. But leading up to this, back maybe we were having early conversations of the draft, October, November, I was totally thinking 1,000%, and I still have a high probability on it, considering who may be on the board come 22, that you spend time during the draft anchoring at least a little bit of your offensive line. Jim Harbaugh told you what he was going to do, and he did it. I thought to myself, okay, Joe Alt, Ladd McConkey last year, maybe you flip that this year and you go to the defensive side of the board, because especially the interior of the defensive line has been neglected as it relates to draft capital for a very, very long time. And there are some great options that they could take at 22 with this interior defensive line class. It is ridiculously deep. But then there's a part of me, Dan, that is saying, don't fall for it again and actually listen to what Jim Harbaugh has to say. If he is saying that they did Justin Herbert a disservice, now you can look at this one of two ways, considering how Jim Harbaugh has talked about how they view offensive linemen as weapons, tip of the spear. But it kind of makes me lean towards either, if they're not able to prioritize it on the offensive line free agency wise, which I actually think that they will. I don't think that there's any way that you don't go out there with the money you spend and not put some into that interior, that offensive line. But something's telling me, Dan, that it leads me towards getting Justin Herbert some either added protection or, much more likely, skill position player for him to throw to. And that's just me connecting the tea leaves of what Jim Harbaugh says. He said it last year, and he continued that same notion for the next 4 months before the draft, and everybody blew up.
So either guard, center, receiver, tight end.
Not a center in the first round. Not a center in the first round, because there's not a viable one at 22.
But is there a guard center combo that can?
Everybody could probably point to Tyler Booker if they're looking for a guard, if you end up missing out on it, just because, again, free agency at the guard position is not the best. So if you're not able to prioritize that, beyond Trey Smith, obviously. Same thing for center free agency class. It's not the best. But again, I'm kind of leaning towards what he's saying and trying to buy into it rather than kind of following the smoke, or following my own smoke. Excuse me. I should be following Jim Harbaugh's smoke.
You're creating the smoke.
Yeah. I should be smoking the Jim Harbaugh pack and following it right now. something's telling me that if he's saying it now, that's going to be his highest priority for him come the draft as well. Now, who knows? Because he didn't have the type of cap space that he had last year to go out and do some of these things.
A lot can change between now and the draft.
Yes. So if it means that T. Higgins ends up coming over to this roster, then my entire notion is going to flip. But if you were to ask me at 22 right now, if there is a specific skill position player that is there at 22, I think the Chargers pounce on it, honestly. If not, then it's interior defensive line.
Is that tight end?
That would make the most sense at 22, given who's, again, early days here.
I know. For sure.
But
is there a receiver that you would do?
Is there a receiver I would do at 22? Yeah. You could try to convince me of that. But again, I'm trying to put everything together as far as Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, how they go with their offensive schemes. And something would lead me to believe that it's either in the trenches on the defense side of the ball or it's tight end. That's where I would isolate it right now. If you're really putting me in a corner, that's what I would say.
Nicholas with another super chat. If no one gets open, it doesn't matter how protected Herbert is. It's a simple, obvious answer. We need an all-star player in both positions. So A, B, or C, all the above. So he's going C. Let's see. Athir with a super chat, Jake. Donation $5. Thank you. Herbert ready to cook. Stay tuned, my baby. I love the little heart emoji at the end of that. Winning the MVP this coming season. I have a bold prediction to say, get ready. Herbert for MVP. Jake, do you see it?
I'm not saying that he can't do it. Doesn't obviously we know the talent that Justin Herbert has. It's bigger than like if he wins MVP, great. Honestly, I could care less whether or not he wins MVP. You think Lamar Jackson is sitting back enjoying the fact that was on the cusp of a third MVP, but is not continuing the playoffs? For Justin Herbert right now, he needs to win a playoff game first. I don't give a crap about the MVP, honestly. I would love for him to play great. I would love for him to be in that conversation.
Wouldn't matter.
But if you could tell me that he's going to have the same type of efficiency that he had in the regular season and not historically numbers that he had when he first came to the league, and it means winning a playoff game, I'm fine with that. Winning in the playoffs, much more important than the MVP to me right now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Rich says, turn the page on ex-Chargers wide receivers. Injuries and age are not on their sides. I think he's talking about Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Of the two, honestly, I probably would say I could see Mike Williams back before Keenan. I think
really
not that Mike Williams is better than Keenan, but I don't know what Keenan does right now that Ladd doesn't do better, honestly. Like they're too similar in my opinion.
Look, not predicting that any.
I don't think either are coming back.
I personally don't think so either. But if you were to tell me, I get what you're doing.
Mike has what you do not.
You're going to the different aspect of what you think that the Chargers could use as far as a downfield threat. DJ Chark, in the few times that he got the ball, was essentially that option, but apparently he was just running wind sprints for a majority of the year. It wasn't really being thrown his direction. But if you were to tell me in the slim possibility that any one of them ended up returning, I would say it's Keenan Allen 100%. He's been 100%. He's been 1,000% transparent about what the next steps for his career has happened. Yes,
it would. But see, like, I would be curious. See, this is what's interesting because you started to see them utilize Ladd a little bit different towards the end of that season, where he started getting a little more downfield with the separation. If they utilize Ladd differently, Ladd plus Keenan could be interesting. But to me, like, the issues that have plagued this Chargers team for years don't get fixed if they bring Keenan in. It doesn't fix anything. Like, I guess, sure, it fixed it in the sense that you get separation, but you get separation, in under 15 yards. And, like, that hasn't been the issue. Although you can argue sometimes it has, I guess, because I don't have anybody that can separate other than Ladd. I don't know. I just don't see it. Okay. HH4. Looks like Minter is staying. ... Huge. Well, I'm knocking on wood for that first. Yeah. I agree.
We haven't been able to say continuity for the Chargers as it relates to the coaching staff, whether it's for good reasons or bad reasons, in a very, very long time. So it's good from the standpoint that as a whole, as of today, that it looks like the entire staff will end up returning.
Yep. And Jim Harbaugh alluded to as much. I think you heard Joe Ortiz talk about there have been some conversations. He's not going to mention names. It's not part of his DNA, but some folks have been discussed by other teams for coaching or front office positions. You saw this Chad Alexander stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if there were other position coaches as well. I don't know if I want to talk about this right now, but I guess we have to. Dennis says, love Herbert, but when the play breaks down, he needs to extend plays with the legs and stop being so robotic. You could argue the Chargers team needs more protection for Justin Herbert. You can argue that this Chargers team needs more weapons for Justin Herbert. Both of those things are true. Also true is I think there is a next step for Justin Herbert. And I got slandered beyond belief. I got killed when I said this a few years ago. Justin Herbert is a fantastic quarterback, but there is still another level for him. And I think it's when the play breaks down, and I think it's when he needs to take matters into his own hands and pure will this team past. And you've seen him do it at times, but a lot of times you've seen things break down around him, and it just kind of happens. No slight to Justin Herbert, but there's another level for him. And there's another comment in the chat here about him needing to get that monkey off his back for the playoffs. It's true. It's true. And that's the noise that will come until he wins his first playoff game. Now, can he and will it turn into one of the best quarterbacks of all time? 100% possibility. But there's a lot of questions, and rightly so. And there's context to a lot of those. We all know that. But Herbert's got a lot of questions to answer. Regardless of what we want to talk about and give excuses for, which a lot of them are valid, he also did not have a great game. Now, was he as bad as I think a lot of people were talking about? No, I don't think so. But a lot of the questions are valid. You have to just accept it and move on. HH4 says they need a new offensive line coach. I think they just need new offensive line players, in my opinion. But I don't know. Eddie Dale says the only time we have said QJ's name was when Jake said it on accident.
I don't think it was that. I get the point trying to make. I didn't say it on accident. Did I say it on accident?
I don't think so.
See, now I can't even remember saying it. But you get the point of what we're trying to talk about in terms of surrounding Justin Herbert with more skill positions or skill position players. Look, as far as Quentin Johnson goes, I appreciate the work that he put in this year, because there's no doubt that you could say that he definitely improved upon the things that he could do or couldn't do in the first season. Now, were there times where those old mistakes end up coming back and rearing their ugly head, and arguably at the worst possible time? No question about it. I'm not trying to absolve him whatsoever of any of that. But I think that the coaching staff that you have put around Quentin Johnston is the right group of people to help him grow into being a better receiver. Now, a lot of that is on Quentin. How you go from 1 week having your best game of your career, 13 catches for 188 yards, and when the playoffs come and they matter, you don't end up showing up. It's reason for criticism. It's reason for criticism. And it's, in some circumstances, deserved. But I am confident in what this coaching staff has said as it relates to Quentin Johnston as far as building his confidence going forward as a receiver. I think this is what gives me confidence in him becoming better. It's what gives me confidence in this team overall being better. I don't know how many times I have mentioned Steve Klingscale as an unsung hero of this defense. I know everybody loves to mention Jesse Minter, and rightfully so, but it's the majority of the group of these positional coaches that have been put around to help develop these players. Navarro Bowman, I mean, we could go down the list in terms of how this coaching staff has been put together. That's what gives me confidence for certain players and positional groups moving forward because of the guys that we have leading them. It's been a long time since this franchise has had coaches that you can talk about like that.
We're at this part of the chat, Jake. QJ adds nothing to the team, says go Chargers go. There's zero noticeable change with him on or off the field. I could not disagree more. Go look at some of those catches over the middle and tell me he makes those his rookie year. Like, I'm not even going to get into this. Let's see. Do you think Pete Carroll going to the Raiders has any effect on the DK Metcalf stuff?
Who knows? Again, does Seattle even want to give him away? It's not like they've come out and said that they're open to trading him. Who knows? But you know that I put more validity into that rumor that's out there that Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson have squashed their beef, and that could be a bigger possibility that because of where the Raiders are draft position-wise, if you aren't able to trade up for one of the top quarterbacks in this draft, you may have to go stopgap option. I could totally see Russell Wilson in Vegas.
100%.
Much more likely than a DK Metcalf here or in Las Vegas.
I'm expecting it for sure. Athir with a $20 donation. Athir, thank you, man. Appreciate it. The 2025, ready for this, folks? The 2025 AFC Juggernaut is Los Angeles Chargers, 14-3. We've all heard Athir says Chargers will be Super Bowl champions this coming season. He has DK Metcalf, Quentin Johnston, Ladd McConkey, Darius, and Darius Slayton. So the two adds there would be DK and Darius Slayton. Then they go Colson Loveland in the draft. So now they have two receivers and a tight end. Then they bring in Aaron Jones to go alongside of J.K. Dobbins and a top 5 defense all season. I'm not afraid. Who are you stopping? Let's go. Of all of those things that you saw there, what are the two that are most realistic that are new?
Number one, not the 14-3 record. That's the first thing that jumps out to me. Look,
fair.
Again, we've said it about Athir. You heard Athir say it about it himself. The patriarch of positivity is Athir. And the bright future that he has for this team, specifically this next coming year, calling a shot for what the Chargers are going to do. 14-3 in the AFC West for what's going to be next year. That's a hefty prediction, especially with the Chargers' schedule being much tougher than it was this past year. Now, as far as some of these free agency additions that he's talking about, I'd be on board with some of them.
Sure.
Overall, how do you put it together? Because I think that there is something that is still lacking from a certain skill position wise that you need to up level. On top of that, once again, if it doesn't matter who's blocking for Justin Herbert, it doesn't matter who the hell the wide receivers are because he may not be able to get it to them. So you have to get that offensive line back to a better position. You've got your tackle situation seemingly figured out. And number one, you still have to pay Rashawn Slater this offseason. But you need to fix the interior of that offensive line for sure.
Brad says, how many elite players did Ortiz draft last year? I don't know if it's taking a shot at Joe Ortiz or not, but I mean, I can point to at least 4 that gave them noticeable, huge impact that season. I mean, you can look at round 5 by itself and go round 1 and 2. And right there, that's worth the entire draft. And look how important, especially round 5 was with those 2 corners. Literally, if you didn't take those 2 corners, then you would have been SOL.
Yes,
like absolutely screwed. So I hope that wasn't a shot at Joe Ortiz's draft because we talked about it. Like that draft class for him, let alone what we might see this coming year from some of those guys who are developing. I don't know, man. I thought that was pretty good. We got about maybe 10 more minutes left here, Jake. Any comments in the chat that we have not gotten to? If you have any questions, put them in here. I think I missed, Jake, other than people shitting on the Raiders.
Which is pretty much commonplace in a Chargers
Yep.
Unleashed chat. I was trying to go back through these to see if there was anything that we missed during some of my stupid rants that I went on.
Eddie Dale says if there was one receiver he would get in this draft class, it's Matthew Golden from Texas.
It's a good option. It's a good option.
Not a shot. He fully likes Ortiz. Okay. Just making sure.
I don't think that anybody would go backwards to what was. Even in a single season, even if you don't have as much time, a decade to one season, I don't think anybody would want to go backwards either.
Yeah, Jeff with an interesting question. Which draft pickup from this year do you expect to have a big year 2? Okay, so I'm gonna take this question as which will have the biggest year 2 leap. So year 2 improvement.
Okay. I think I know where you're going to go with this too.
Yeah, I think it's an easy one for me. I think it's Junior Colson. It was unfortunate. He had a bunch of setbacks early on in the offseason with surgeries and health and stuff, and then just couldn't get up to speed with things. And then also purely the linebacker crew balled out this year. Like, it's hard for you to beat out Deion Henley, who had a Pro Bowl season. Denzel Perryman, when he was there, was fantastic. Troy Dye looked amazing when he was out there. Like, it's hard to beat out those guys as a rookie. But yeah, I think Junior Colson will have a big year 2 leap. I'm curious to see Tarhew still, like what another year for him would look like. Because dude, he's good, man. Other than that, like, it's hard to have it's hard to have a big leap for guys like Joe Alt, who already is like top 5 tackle. For guys like Ladd McConkey, who's already was in the top 3 rookie receivers already. I don't know. Maybe the D tackle we didn't hear much of. But for me, it's an easy Junior Colson. What about you?
I would say the same. And I take this off of our conversations that we had about Junior Colston and his familiarity, obviously, with Jesse Minter's defense. There was a lot of expectation for him. I mean, I know that it was kind of unfair given the fact that Deion Henley, who was not really utilized his rookie year, but my God, to see how he blossomed in his first real season under Navarro Bowman in this particular defense, you could potentially have, if you can get Junior Colson where you need to be, you could have a lethal 1-2 punch at your linebacking group. And Jesse Minter has always said that that's exactly what he's looking for. He's not looking for one guy. He's looking for 2 guys.
Brendan Rice now is also being talked about.
So
fun. Some people, wow, this is the dichotomy of Chargers fans. Brad says I say Rice, and Jess says Rice will not be a part of the team. Okay, which one do you lean towards?
We'll see. I'll finish on my Junior Colson rant for a second. I think there's, as you had gone through and mentioned, I think a lot of things really impeded his rookie season due to injuries and a variety of other things. But I think he's going to come back super motivated this year. And again, just getting this year, even if it's been most of the time on the bench learning under Bowman in a defense that he is extremely familiar with, I'm excited to see what he can do in year 2 of his season. And again, you may end up having, if everything comes to fruition with Junior Colson, you may have easily the most athletic linebacker duo in the NFL if you can get Junior Colson to where he needs to be.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's going to be a great signing. I mean, we haven't even talked about the history and the connection with Michigan defense and how much, like, that's all water to the bridge at this point that we know. What else? What I miss? How many receivers, says Derek in Brandon's channel, how many receivers do we have with questions? Only Ladd is reliable. I mean, Josh Palmer's a free agent. DJ Chark's free agent. You got Darius Davis. Ladd. Technically, you got Brendan Rice. QJ.
there was a reason, I'll repeat this, while publications were saying that the Chargers had one of the worst wide receiver groups heading into last year. And you won 11 games with them. It's actually a testament to Justin Herbert, Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh, all parties included, the fact that you were able to win that many games with this wide receiver core. Crazy. But yeah, there's still questions, and there's still a lot of opportunity for upgrades.
Holy shit, Jake. Russell McCrady with a $50 donation. Dude, thank you. I'm literally going to go get a six-pack at some point, and I will say cheers to Russell McCrady. McCrady. When I have it. Hey, guys. First year as a Chargers fan. Thanks for the content. You're welcome. I don't have the chargering scars, so it was a fun year. Man, that must be nice, by the way. Imagine going into it like, oh, that's my first season, 11 wins, good draft pick, Joe Ortiz, Jim Harbaugh, Ladd McConkey, on this Joe Alt thing, Derwin James is an all-pro. Like,
you picked a good year.
Lovely.
You picked a good year to start rooting for the Chargers.
God, that sounds lovely. Lucky. It says, sweet jumps. First year, lucky you. Sincerely, the only Chargers fans in Ouray County, Colorado. Shout out, represent. Put that bolt on with pride. Thank you, Russell. Seriously, that's too kind. You're too kind. Let's see. There was a question here. Met you at the tailgate at the Bay. Doing it again this year. I don't know. That was fun, though. That was fun. Eddie with a question. Who is the worst starter on the offense that you would keep if it meant everywhere else got improved? Who's the worst starter on the offense? Entire offense? Offensive line? I'm guessing what he meant.
Where's it? I thought that's where this question was leading, towards the offensive line. If that's where it was going, I would probably say. If we're just talking about your starters, so if you're talking about your projected starters to say Rashawn, Zion, Bozeman, Trey Pipkins, basically what you had last year as your starting offensive line. And if going towards this question, who is the worst starter on the offensive line that you would keep if it meant everywhere else got improved? If this is assuming that center and guard get improved, then I would probably say I would keep Zion Johnson. That's where I would go. Obviously, center and right guard need a huge upgrade. But if
he says the entire offense.
The entire offense.
JK. Easy.
But how are you calibrating worst player on offense if it meant everyone else around is better in that?
Like I'm saying, if we had to keep one guy on offense that is a free agent that needs to improve, like, yeah, easy. I would take him in a heartbeat. I also think Stone Smart is I think he's a restricted free agent, if I remember right. So I think he needs to come back too. Let's see. HH4 says, the minute that Trey Pipkins is released, the offensive line will improve. The interior needs to improve. I'll just put it that way. Okay. A lot of people talk about back in the day Chargers at the Murph. Qualcomm. Love that. My first game at the Murph was the Fumble Rooski game versus the Haters. Remember that?
I remember that. I remember when we also had someone call into the hotline earlier this year, maybe no more than a month ago, dropping John Hadel references for crying out loud. I love hearing old school Chargers stories. It's great.
Bob from Boston. Yeah, I remember that.
Bob from Boston. Nicky Pockets. I need Bob from Boston to call this show once again, because he along with, and I apologize that I'm forgetting the guy's name, but the guy who came in and started narrating the Chargers win, those two guys were the winners of the hotline for sure. They became quick fan favorites of everybody. They need to call into the show more often.
Yes. Jake, you're in luck. I thought about if we should play this or not, because it's going to open up old wounds.
Oh God, here we go.
But you wanted Bob from Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have Bob from Boston back. Chargers fans, we're going to end on this one. We have Bob from Boston. Here we go.
All right.
Hey, Bob from Boston calling.
I already feel better.
Oh my
What
God.
the hell happened? Oh, crap. I'm not supposed to swear. Jesus, I did it again. Well,
Yes.
Bob, I love you. Here
So
we go.
good.
well, listen, boys, listen. We lost. But you two were acting like two old Sicilian ladies dressed all in black at a funeral, beating your chests and crying, "Oh, Marona mi, è morto, è morto." Listen, our Chargers had a bad game. They should easily have been up 17-zip, but a fluke fumble and pass changed all the momentum, and they didn't have the experience to withstand it. But, and remember this, what does it take to win in the NFL?
Ooh, what does it take to win the NFL?
Let Bob from Boston answer the question.
Great coach, a really good quarterback, and 6 to 8 really above average guys with experience who can carry a team. We got all that. We got all that.
6 to 8 average guys. Plus a head coach and a quarterback. We're rolling.
What we don't have is playoff experience, and now we have that. And we have Jim freaking Harbaugh. Oh, damn it, I swore again. I didn't mean to do that. Listen, we have a good draft and another year, and I'm telling you boys, I'm telling everybody in San Diego, we're all set. So take off the black shawls,
Jake, take that black shirt off, baby.
put your heads out of your sorry buttholes, have some chicken parm and cannoli, and be positive about next year. Listen, you ain't the sorry Patriots. You ain't the moronic Jets. You're the rising Chargers. You boys are still invited to come east next summer, but only if you stop with the woe is me baloney. Especially you, Dan. You look like some 5-year-old kid, and the neighborhood bully just stole your poodle on the podcast next week. Chin up. Listen, this season was great. Next season is going to be better.
Oh my God.
Everybody relax. Have a calzone and a beer. Charges unleashed.
Oh my God.
I bowed down.
There's nobody who can make you feel. There's very few people that can make you feel better about yourself while also giving you an insult at the same time. That is Bob from Boston. My God. Dan,
I needed
I need to take off the black shawl. You look like, some
Oh my
5-year-old who
God.
just lost his poodle when we were talking about that recap. My goodness. Again, I'll take all the smoke from Bob because I understand what the man says, but he also makes me feel better to just shut the hell up. And if
Kind of savage.
God, if there is not a better way to go into the kickoff of the offseason, it's like that. It's like that.
This is why we do this.
Bob from Boston.
Brad, Bob from Boston is the man. Hilarious. Chin up, Jake. Bob, you are a treasure, my friend. I need more cannolis. Good Lord. But we're still invited, Jake. We're still invited to the party, even though I crashed out like a 5-year-old, whatever it was. I mean, I was sad, man. I was sad. Sorry.
I remember there was actually one comment that was put on the show. We did that recap. It's like, you guys started that show looking like you were like right at the edge, ready to jump. And then you slowly brought yourselves back, which was exactly the truth. I remember how that show went. And that was after taking a few days to really digest what had happened. And it still felt fresh and it still sucked to talk about. But God, you just got to get those demons out a little bit.
Yep.
And then to have Bob from Boston just give you a verbal smack across the face and pick yourself up and let's go forward. Yes, that's the way to do it.
If I'm ever having a bad day and there's some truth behind the reason why, like if I really screwed up, if I made a mistake, like I want to have Bob from Boston be there. Like he'll make me feel better, but also tell me how stupid I was at the same time.
Also true.
So you need someone like that in your life.
He's going to send you to Nicky Pockets.
Cannoli.
He'll straighten you out.
Oh, man. But the good news is, Chargers fan, I think we need to leave it at that. We have the offseason now, and Jake gets to hear that precious for the next, 3 months?
Yes.
It will never get old. It will never get old. Game ball for Bobby. Yep, I'm with you. This has been fun, Jake. Chargers fans, you guys are great as always. You guys kept this thing rolling for an hour and a half at this point. Y'all are balling. All the folks in the super chat, seriously, thank you. That was super, super kind. Athir, Russell with a $50 donation, Athir with a $20 donation, Dark Samus, Nicholas Petrelli, a bunch of folks in here. Envy Talent, Dark Samus again. You guys are incredible. Appreciate all of the support. Season did not go like we thought it would, going into that Texans game specifically, but at the macro, 11 wins pretty good. You got your head coach, you got your GM, you got your quarterback, and you've got a bunch of picks in this draft and a bunch of money to spend. Jake, appreciate you. Happy New Year to everyone who has not yet seen us in 2025. Jake, parting words from you before we all get out of here and smash the like button, asks Brad. Yes, please hit the like, subscribe. Helps out a ton.
Let's kick off the offseason properly. All right. Remember what I told everybody to start this show. How do you deal with some tough times in the offseason when your team isn't playing, no longer playing in the playoffs or vying for a championship game? Dig into the NFL draft. It's going to get you through these next 3 months. I promise you. I promise you. It's some of the best therapy for football fans. Let's go. Let's dig into the offseason. We got a big 3 months ahead of us.
Speaking of digging in and therapy, I avoided all Chargers content until today since Houston. Thanks, guys. Sweet jumps.
Smart man.
I literally haven't watched a second of NFL football since that game. Not one. That's not true. I think I saw a couple highlights when I was at dinner somewhere. Maybe a minute or two. Who knows? Mahalo. Shaka, you guys are the greatest. Keep it unleashed. Thank you for my friend. Jess, apparently, same thing. Jake has not watched football since that Houston game. There is a decompression time frame. Being a Chargers fan ain't easy, says HH4. Yeah. 100%.
I'd say that's accurate.
Great show today, Brother Bolt Up, says Brad. Let's go, Buffalo. Please, can we please? Jake's drinking something harder than this monster. Yeah.
I've already kind of reserved myself to it, so it's ready to go. All right.
Oh, man. Well, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find Jake at Jake T. Hefner, myself at Dan W. Sports on X and anywhere you find your podcasts, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, you name it. We're everywhere. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will talk to you next on the next Chargers. I got to find the button, hit the bet out of here. Unleashed. See you later, everybody.